Pete, how are we doing so far?
Great. Yeah, thrilled to be here.
Good, good. So, well, let's put Cincinnati in the context of the Heartland. What is it that's unique about Cincinnati that makes it a hub?
Yeah, I think there's so many attributes. I'm not even sure where to begin, but the reasons why I decided to launch my first startup here in Cincinnati, just an incredibly supportive ecosystem that gets stronger every day. There's a real spirit of collaboration. We have a kind of a programming element we call Startup Cincy, where we've got a lot of different incubators, accelerators, universities, corporates, others that are really turning this into like a huge welcome mat for entrepreneurs of all types of entrepreneurs. And for me, that was like really, really appealing. So incredible kind of civic community support. Cost of living is fantastic. You've got large corporations that they're not just big companies, they're leaders in their categories. I mean, P&G is the world's largest advertiser. Kroger is, depending on who you talk to, the second or third largest grocery retailer that's also becoming a major player in health and data science. And then you've got players like Scripps and Western and Southern and Fifth Third Bank that are all kind of bringing really unique strengths in financial services, and they're really eager to reinvent themselves to kind of discover the future. And they see external partners and startups as kind of part of that incredible environment. You've got neighborhoods that are dynamic and thriving and growing and diverse and urban. And so I think for entrepreneurs that are looking to grab the future, push boundaries, I mean, this is a fantastic community to do that. So there's a very long list, and there's a growing pool of venture firms that are here that are eager to invest. I think when I started here, it was a little bit light, but now there's a nice diverse mix, and I hope that we're going to grow that even more. We're playing a role there, but we're also, working in partnership with a lot of other players, and I'm super bullish on, even beyond just Cincinnati, there's some really good vibes coming to Ohio. They're all over the national headlines right now, whether it's Intel coming here for, great place to do business, fantastic climate environment, world's greatest water, you name it. But there's a lot of things that are playing out. And I would even suspect that, believe that, we've seen a lot about federal incentives and national legislation really focus on fortifying American competitiveness. And there's just no question that there is an advantage of the Midwest. I think you hit it in your book, but I think Cincinnati is also uniquely positioned because we are in an extraordinarily unique supply way corridor. Sometimes I like to use the term Great Supply Way. Some call it corridor of commerce. But Amazon is now based in our airport. We're now the #1 e-commerce distribution hub in the country. On top of Amazon, we have DHL, we have players like Wayfair. We've got a whole distribution, supply chain, and logistics that is kind of wrapping around Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and parts of Indiana. And that corridor is becoming increasingly green. So there's just like a lot of great reasons why this region is thriving and why it's a great place for entrepreneurs to set up shop.
Right. It's all about this cluster effect. And so Cincinnati has that with the university there factoring in quite strongly. Can you talk about the University of Cincinnati's role in pushing this whole tech forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, we always take a step back, to put that in context. Our goal is to become the #1 startup hub in the Midwest and a top innovation center in the country. And we do it in 3 ways. #1, we provide critical resources. We attract talent and capital. And I'll come back to that in a moment in the context of the University of Cincinnati. We're also really trying to sharpen focus on the startups that have real scalability potential. And third, we're really trying to help our region's big companies solve their innovation challenges right here in Cincinnati. So on the top one, about attracting talent and capital, universities like University of Cincinnati and Miami and Xavier and NKU are playing a critical role. But I would say that the UC is, as a major research institution, is playing an outsized role, and they are really in a renaissance. They are really experiencing some hockey stick growth. The state is heavily investing in their innovation, in their capacity. They just opened up a digital futures facility that would knock your socks off. I don't think it was there when you got here. Maybe it was under construction.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot more coming online. We think there's a gold mine in the IP transfer potential. The lieutenant governor was just here a couple of weeks ago talking about the Ohio IP promise. That's actually a concept that originated with the University of Cincinnati that's now going statewide. But we think there's a tremendous opportunity, not unlike Stanford, not unlike MIT, to tap into the incredible intellectual property that's coming out of the faculty to translate those into startup ideas. And one thing that we're going to be doing, putting a big focus on, in fact, we dedicated time in our board meeting last week to talking about, which is like, how do you create a smarter filter on top of it to understand what's under the hood of the university? How do you make it increasingly more accessible? And then how do you act upon it? And we'll do the same thing with even our big companies that have licensable IP. You've heard some stories about P&G and PureCycle, or Cincinnati Children's Hospital, one of the top hospital networks in the country, maybe the world. They have seeded a lot of startups with one of our venture capital firms, Cincy Tech. So whether it's UC, our big cos, or our hospital networks, IP transfer is going to be a really, really big idea, and we'll be taking full advantage of it in the coming year.
So this is one big difference between Silicon Valley and what I've seen occur in the Midwest, that the state government is a lot more involved in helping the VCs attract more capital and fund more startups. Can you talk about the role of Ohio in helping to jumpstart this action, and particularly with Cintrifuse as well?
Well, I'll first challenge what you said a little bit, because you didn't mention this in my bio, but I spent my first 5 years in public policy as a legislative analyst and in the California legislature. And there actually was quite a bit that California did, I think, that kind of created the conditions for, today's Silicon Valley. I think there's sometimes a perception that it was all, freewheeling, entrepreneurialism. But I do think the state set a lot of conditions that really made it easier for startups and venture capital to thrive. And I do think Ohio is taking similar steps. I mean, clearly getting that university infrastructure properly funded, building that talent pipeline in the future is almost table stakes. And I think they're doing a great job. But they also have programs like the Ohio Third Frontier, which came out of a bond issue a number of years ago, that is playing a big role in helping a lot of startup organizations across the state, from Jumpstart up north to Rev One in Columbus, to Cintrifuse, Cincy Tech, and others here, to really get a leg up. And the way that typically works is, if we can find a match, if our big companies can make an investment, they will match those dollars, provided we earmark those services to startups. And I think that's a really, really smart move. And I give a lot of credit to elected officials on both sides of the aisle for kind of rallying around that. There's absolutely no question in my mind that that type of leadership from the state is paying dividends. We would not have Intel here today if the state leadership on both sides of the aisle didn't have the vision to say, hey, we're going to take a chance and we're going to invest in these future entrepreneurs. It created the climate that has created a bit of a multiplier effect, in my view. So policy is absolutely key. And there's going to be more of a need for that as we try to figure out, how do we take advantage of federal dollars? How do we think about innovation districts? How do we identify clusters where we can compete and really shine light on certain sectors, whether it's healthcare or health tech, or whether it's just climate tech, or whether it's fintech? I think policy is going to play a really important role there.
Yeah, so one of the issues that I have found in all of the Heartland markets is the shortage of venture capital. And so that goes a long way toward addressing it, but maybe not enough. What is it going to take for the coastal VC firms to really come in and start to actively invest and maybe even set up shop?
Yeah, listen, if you had this, the really simple answer is trial. That's the first thing you learn in marketing when you go to Procter and Gamble. It's all about trial. They tried a product, the likelihood that they're going to convert and become a lifetime customer goes up dramatically. And what I have learned is that you just got to get people here. You have to help them look under the hood, taste the product, and they will come back. And we are doing everything we can. So for example, we had a really successful Startup Cincy Week a couple months ago. We had several thousand attendees, record-breaking numbers. We filled up a bunch of buildings. We had fantastic programming. But most importantly, if you ask me what was I proudest of, we got 35 venture capital firms, mostly from outside of Ohio or outside the region, to come to Cincinnati. And they were blown away. And if you think I'm hyperventilating or embellishing, go to Twitter and you can find testimonials from VCs that were on the West Coast saying, I had no idea. And so what I think Cincinnati, Ohio, the Midwest needs to do is that we need to become much better marketers. We need to be sharp in our value proposition, and we need to speak with a common voice, and we need to convert the skeptics, and we have to take these moments like this national movement towards greater US competitiveness, or this groundbreaking Intel activity, or the fact that Amazon is now anchored in our backyard, and use that as currency to get people here to see there. I believe a lot more venture capital firms, if they don't set up shop here entirely, I think they're going to distribute their presence in the Midwest, and that's a big part of the Cintrifuse strategy. But if you think about it, when I launched a startup back in 2000 or so, there's maybe a couple venture capital firms. Now we've got nearly a dozen sources, from traditional VC to Queen City Angels to other capital sources, and I think that's going to grow. I'm very confident that's going to grow.
And you have some unicorn companies too, don't you?
Yeah, listen, I mean, it depends on what day when you evaluate, how much they're worth. Yeah. But yeah, I think, I'd say the big three in our region are Enable Injections. That's a company out of the Cincy Tech portfolio that we actually invested in as well. That is, doing extremely well. And, that you can just kind of Google them on the news and sort of see some really great news coming around the corner from in terms of getting approvals for certain products. Astronomer, which is kind of more of a tech play, but they have they actually incubated for a while in Union Hall, the place where Cincy is located, and they took money from a couple of our VC firms, Cincy Tech and Refinery, but they're doing extremely well. And another one, which is kind of one of my favorites, is 80 Acres Farms. As you know, you don't need to tell anybody I'm passionate about the green space, but I just think I am just blown away by what the hydroponic players are doing. The notion of like 97% less water to produce, incredibly healthy, lettuce and now strawberries, and real sustainability mindset. And they've been growing significantly, and not only growing, but bringing some of the big names. To your earlier question, kind of bringing some of the world's leading venture capitalists to Cincinnati, like General Atlantic, or Barclays. They even got money from Siemens. And so I think some of these top tier startups are attracting a lot of global attention. And again, to my point about trial, that should pay dividends for us quite a bit going down the line.
Right. So what about the entrepreneurial culture there? I mean, one of the aspects of it is Silicon Valley has, this really rich, deep startup culture. You walk down the street, people are talking about their latest startup and their latest pitch. I mean, I'm out there half the time, and I walk around in my neighborhood and I hear people talking like this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I've ever heard that in my homeland area around Columbus, but maybe someday.
Not there yet. We're not there yet, but we'll get it. And we've got it. You definitely see it episodically. And I think, like, for example, in our neighborhood, I may go to lunch and I might bump into like 3 different entrepreneurs. I almost feel like I'm in Silicon Valley where, kind of connections are made. Have we scaled that across the entire city? No, but I think there's a real will to do that. And I think, we have a team that's working on, again, this notion of startup Cincy, which has really posted some fantastic gains in the last 12 months in terms of driving those connections, whether it's through events, whether it's through online activity. For example, they launched an app for Startup Cincy Week, and I was kind of blown away at how many connections were made. So much so that I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta raise my own game just to kind of get points to interact with others. But I think that listen, nothing compares to even going to a coffee shop in Silicon Valley, and there's a VC lawyer like in the booth next to you, and there's a crazy engineer, and but I think we're learning from that, and I think and we'll invent our own genre of doing that, and I think we're on a good path for that.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's part of the issue of the Heartland Rising, is that there's this confidence factor because it hasn't really been proven steadily yet, maybe just in bits and pieces. So a lot more has to happen before you have this, huge confidence factor that Silicon Valley has, and that I saw actually in China too in the early days.
There's a certain brand of grit. There's listen, I mean, I think in Silicon Valley, you've just got so much talent that is rotated repeatedly in hyper growth environments. And so I'd say that, we've got fantastic talent. We've got some of the world's greatest companies, but we've also got, a lot of talent that sticks around with those companies for quite some time. And I think we need to think through what the talent cycle look like. What's the talent flywheel? So I'll give you a good example. One of our most successful startups, Vinly, focused on contingent workforce management, was founded by a gentleman named Shashank Saxena, who was a Kroger employee. He's kind of leading a dimension of digital within Kroger, saw a big idea on the inside. And I think that's the power of the big companies. Even your frustrations can lead to breakthrough ideas that you kind of want to take on the outside. Found a great idea, went on the outside, it was seeded by, certain venture sources. We participated, and they kind of housed in our office, and then they kind of grew, kind of exponentially, and ultimately were sold to Workday. But what was interesting about it is it kind of started with an entrepreneur on the inside. You kind of went on the outside, and I think what we're and I think that's part of the formula that we're trying to develop within, Cintrifuse. A lot of our best fintech entrepreneurs have roots in companies like Fifth Third. In fact, Paycor that you kind of see emblazoned across the stadium, it actually has roots in Fifth Third. WorldPay, which is now part of Fisk Global, has roots in Fifth Third. So part of what we're trying to think through is how that whole talent flywheel works from like the big co to the startup environment. And I think there's a lot of potential there. A lot of the talent from Procter, people from Procter do amazing things, but they typically leave Cincinnati. I was more the exception, which is like, no, I'm actually not going to go back to California. I'm actually going to go down the street, and I'm going to hire talent faster. I'm going to make the penny scream when it comes down to kind of managing my burn rate, and I'm going to find this unfair advantage. And so I think there's a big opportunity in sort of almost like routing talent before it naturally leaves and say, come back into our startup ecosystem. And that's why all these programs that we're developing are so critical, because you want to give that talent the signal that when you are ready to leave that job, that big company, there is an ecosystem that is eager to support you in every way possible. It's almost like de-risking the departure in a way.
Yeah, and P&G has a startup studio, and they also are investing in startups. So you have that element too. This corporate element is so strong in Cincinnati. I think it's a real plus for the city. And
It's
another
not
plus,
easy. I mean, listen, I don't want to, I want to kind of like gloss over. Yeah, and listen, I think, I've worked in big companies, P&G, Nielsen, Nestle, and, there are real challenges to kind of helping them innovate. And sometimes they move really slow. And so I think the key is to figure out how can you turn that startup energy, that know-how, that can do, that see around corners as an opportunity for them. There isn't a CEO on the planet, even from the largest, most conservative companies, that isn't telling Wall Street that they need to move faster and that they need to disrupt or be disrupted. And so the key is to figure out where the startup value proposition serves as vitamins for that particular objective. And again, I think we're starting to crack the code, but it's hard. It's not easy, but we're on a mission to kind of get there. I'm very lucky that the chair of Cintrifuse, Guy Persada, you might have talked to before. Sure. I know you talked to Valerie Shepard, but he's the president of growth. He is the executive who is in charge of discovering new value outside of the traditional categories, running PG Ventures. And so one would presume there's a fantastic synergy between the mission of Cintrifuse and what he's trying to do. And that's what we're trying to work through. And I think we're making headway, but there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah.
So one of the companies that I write about in my book, Silicon Heartland, is Pure Cycle, which is a spin out from P&G. Through another company called Inventure, which is also another Heartland company, an investment firm. But that's down the river from you, down the Ohio River from you. And I visited them, and they're all about recycling. So I know that's one of the areas that you're really keen about is recycling and sustainability. So that there's a 2 and 2 right there.
Huge opportunity. Our team's doing a brilliant, but I don't sound like I'm bragging too much, but our team's doing a brilliant job in that area. In fact, one of the areas I'm most proudest of this year is that we've really forged this great relationship with our city, and our city is just, cities are fantastic learning labs. We always talk about, doing the pilot with P&G, but the cities are really where a lot of the big opportunities and the challenges can be solved. And so they approached our team to do a litter hack. I think it was one of the first in the country and that's like, if you polled residents, they would say, oh my gosh, that's like the #1 issue. You got to fix litter. And so we didn't just do a hack, we did a multi-layered exercise, which was almost like giving the city startup steroids. And they brought in all the different folks and they tackled it from different angles. And we ended up having like 20 or 19 teams that came up with really awesome ideas. Some of them have gotten funding or moving forward, but there's more. They came back to our team and said, hey, we were so happy with what you did. We now want to take on recycling, which in my view is an even bigger idea and has huge relevance to startup growth. I mean, when I was at Nestle, the recycling solutions were what really gave me chills in terms of like really moving the needle on climate change. And so we're going to tackle that. And the city is particularly interesting on that front because they've got relationships with major waste disposal players. They've got open data platforms that basically put, recycling data and green data available to students and others to kind of hack. And so, we're planning a second hack, and I'm pretty optimistic about where that's going to go. And we even think that could lead to some fantastic, startup ideas. But the whole green space, I think, is really, that's the area. When I took this job, I was like, okay, where, how do you differentiate? Everybody's trying to create a startup hub. Where do you win?
Yeah.
And, and I was looking around, and honestly, I was really surprised. I was like, looked around, I was like, oh my gosh, Cincinnati's rated what? They're rated the #1 most sustainable city in the country. I almost like forced a double take. And then I was looking at bike trails to everything. It was really high. And then I started reading the ESG reports from the companies from P&G to Kroger. I'm like, oh my gosh, like if they do half of what they're promising, we could completely transform our startup, startup landscape.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
and that's
but
where
this,
it gets, and I like the green space because companies are under the gun to move faster. There was no space at Nestle that moved faster than green.
oh, really?
Oh my gosh. First off, it only takes one search on Twitter to see activists and detractors basically lighting a fire under these issues. That was my job at Nestle. I was managing social media. I felt like I was in a bunker.
Yeah.
But that creates a sense of accountability. Those platforms are like getting in front of all the shoppers. And I'll never forget when they hired an outsider CEO, which was like, that never happened at companies like Nestle. And I remember he came in, a guy named Mark Schneider, and he immediately zeroed in on the plastics issue. Within 5 seconds, he's like, wait a second, we have got to tackle that issue or we're going to be in big trouble. So I call those urgency catalysts. I think there are areas in innovation where there's really a sense of urgency. I would put diversity in that bucket too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about diversity as well. That was on my list.
I think a lot of companies, I wouldn't say they were asleep at the wheel, but they kind of just, it maybe fell into the nice to have area. I think the Black Lives Matter movement kind of put it back in the forefront. And I think there's a recognition today that maybe wasn't there before, that there is massive business upside of getting this right. Like, when I was in California in public policy, if you didn't have a clue about Hispanics or Latinos, you were just leaving all the business opportunity on the table. And I think there's now a recognition that if you are not more attentive to these opportunities, to these market segments, then you are, you're kind of, then you're probably gonna, if we don't have more diverse founders, we can't really drive an innovation economy. And so, I think diversity and innovation share a symbiotic relationship. That point was very loudly clarified for me when I was at Nestle, and also earlier when I was in California. And I think there's a lot of activity here. There's some fantastic movement here. There's like leaders like Candace Brackeen and Brian Brackeen who kind of created Lightship Capital, which is one of the top Black-owned VCs, and they brought Black Tech Week here. They brought Serena Williams here. They kind of completely changed the mindset of what's possible. They kind of inspired the big co's to get more involved, and we need a lot more of that. I think it would be awesome if, and this is an area where I would say more aspirational than real. Don't want to, but the potential to become like a Black Tech hub would be really, really powerful. I think that could be another area like sustainability that could take us to a whole nother level of achievement as an ecosystem. And I think there's definitely that ambition, that desire. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, even on the investment side. But yeah, that I get really excited about that.
Yeah, there's very little funding for minority entrepreneurs. Very, very little, very slim.
My number one tweet of the year, I was going through all my tweets to find out, okay, what clicked, what didn't. And I was telling my marketing colleagues, like the Serena Williams was here, and she basically and she packed the entire one of the local auditoriums. And she didn't say a word about tennis. She just talked about her role as a VC, and she's super, super sharp on top of it. But she kind of brought a silence to the room when she just said, my mind could not compute the fact that only 2% of all venture capital goes to diverse founders. And I tweeted that, and I don't think there's a single thing I've tweeted like in the last 10 years that struck such a chord, resonated, got more follow-on comment. And that's an issue that we have to address. It doesn't square, it defies gravity. And I certainly hope, as part of my contribution, my legacy, but also, Cintrifuse and our ecosystem, I know there's a real will to make an impact there. And I know words are cheap. We got to translate it into action. One reason why I'm particularly excited about sustainability and even fintech is that if you ran an analysis of sustainability startups across the country relative to other sectors, you'd see a much higher density of diverse founders. And certain aspects of fintech too. I love the inclusive fintech space, and there's quite a few players in Cincinnati that are kind of pushing boundaries in that area, like Pay Theory and others. And but there's if you really think about like what pillar do you want to really develop, you may find that they lend themselves more to a diverse founder profile.
Right. There are other cities, of course, in the Heartland that are going after this same sector as well. I was in Tulsa recently, and they're rebuilding Black Wall Street. And
Exactly.
yeah, so they
And in
have,
fact, Lightship is very, very active there.
Yeah.
What I love about their models, they've just got network effects across different cities. So we're proud and excited that they're based in Cincinnati, but they're also having impact in Detroit and Tulsa and others, and just building that pipeline that I think is critically important.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, the diversity element I think is very impactful. And cities that don't have that are just, a one type of person, it's kind of boring actually. And I think innovation thrives around, having a lot of different voices and, a lot of perspectives. And a place like New York City has no shortage of that. And, Cincinnati, just visiting Cincinnati too. I mean, one of the things that struck me about Cincinnati is this divide between, there were a lot of, really, really nice areas, but then there were a lot of areas that were, left behind. So what is the city doing about these left behind areas? In fact, there's the Over the Rhine area just behind I guess it's a little bit north of the Over the Rhine area. It must be how Over the Rhine looked before it was transformed, but this whole area just broken down, shabby homes. What can be done about this? Can innovation, can venture capital, can startups address that, or is that kind of just going to always be left behind?
Yeah, in fact, I hope it becomes our competitive advantage that we, by looking squarely at those issues, those pain points, those disparities, that we become better innovators. I mean, I do think, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that, I said earlier, cities are labs. And that wasn't just, I think it's all the issues that cities face. And, how do you build, greater equity in urban cores? How do you thoughtfully manage, gentrification realities? How do you balance low-income housing with, fancy neighborhoods in this, in the street? And these are all really, really important issues. And I give this city, one of the reasons I love this city, I think they jump right into these issues, even if they risk maybe getting it wrong or maybe slipping, or I think there's a real will to figure it out. Even on that litter hack that I thought our team brilliantly managed. One of the really big issues that I thought brought a lot of people to the table, but and I don't think enough people talk about it, is that litter is disproportionately impacting underserved communities. And it is, and it's everybody's challenge, but there's no question. You go to poor neighborhoods, it's disproportionately, some people don't care about it, that it's there. And we tackled that, and that was kind of brought to the fore. And so whether it's litter or other issues, but I think the entrepreneurial community is a big part of the answer there, right? Because I think the barriers are low. And when you have all these incredible entrepreneurial support services, I think the barriers are low for folks to jump in. Our space is practically free. We need to do a better job of outreach and letting the community know that we have services. And I really think we're doing a great job of doing that, but there's always more. I think we have to be really intentional about building the upper funnel of younger people I do think as you go younger, you get a heck of a lot more diverse. You get a lot more, you just bring a much greater diversity profile,
Yeah,
race, economic background. We've done programs like Entrepreneurs Change the World, where we have reached out to schools and said, okay, we're going to train you being an entrepreneur at the high school age. And you dramatically increase your diversity profile. And these kids are just coming up with some of the best solutions. And again, if you can, I mean, what helped me at age 14, I got the entrepreneurial bug. I was selling avocados in Southern California. And once you get that bug, you never go back, right? Now I'm kind of doing the same thing on the tech front, but how do you kind of create those opportunities? How do you create that healthy addiction, if you will, with young people to understand the possibilities of creating your own company? And that's where I think, that's why I think the startup community can have the biggest impact. And I certainly hope, next time we have our conversation, that I can point to even greater results on that front in terms of really penetrating a much deeper remit of stakeholders.
right. So how are some of the Cincinnati-based startups getting by now with this new economic downturn? And are you seeing the same kind of cutbacks there that you're seeing in other places?
Yeah, we actively discuss it. So I think last June there was a big, everybody was really getting pretty antsy, and you're constantly recalibrating. We had a big board discussion. We brought in our local VCs to talk about it. And in the past, we've had, we've like one time, I think during the COVID period, we had our most oversubscribed webinar was managing cash flow. We actually had the treasurer of P&G kind of help on that. But yeah, you kind of need to adapt your lessons to the circumstances. And I think we do a good job of that. But yeah, and also just being super empathetic. I mean, listen, I'm probably guilty of romanticizing launching a startup. It's really, really hard. It's stressful. You get a lot of battle scars, and you got to know what you're getting into. For a lot of entrepreneurs, it can really, destroy relationships, you name it. And so sure. I think empathy is so important in times of stress. And, I personally and my team, we'll reach out, we'll really try to understand the unique issues. We may at times, bang the drum a little bit more loudly with sources of capital, because if you don't get that bridge capital in times of stress, the business is gone. And so you really need to kind of work that. And so, but yeah, I mean, this has been a crazy year. It's been super wobbly. I've gone through my own level of like, oh my gosh, like, is Cintrifuse going to be challenged by this? But I do think, and this is where I hope my friends on the West Coast don't get mad, but I do think there's a unique resilience in the Midwest. I think you can kind of hide out from the hype zones. And I think there's an element of being here which might actually increase odds of success in the downturn. When I launched a startup, they had the .com crash, and it just washed out so many firms on the coast. But I felt like I had a unique advantage. I almost felt like I hid out from that hype. And so, and that's where our team is trying to figure out what is that unique advantage of almost that unfair advantage of the Midwest, right, especially in tough times.
Right. So all this new federal government money that's coming in, like the Build Back Better challenge, and also the infrastructure planning. So what about, is Cincinnati benefiting from that? I mean, I guess somebody's mentioning here too that Detroit got one of the Build Back Better regional challenge grants. But they were not too many in the Midwest. I think there was one other, Pittsburgh actually got something. But did Cincinnati go for one of those regional challenge grants?
Yeah, we did go for a challenge grant on Build Back Better. Regrettably, we didn't have it. Although I personally thought the vision we brought to the table around advanced green mobility and manufacturing was spot on, and I'm hoping we can do more around that. But I think to your question, there's a lot of, again, there's like a trifecta of federal legislation: Build Back Better, CHIPS Act, Climate Act, or Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah. There's a lot to go through. I just got out of a meeting with my team to try to almost like, what is out there and where do you prioritize? And that's going to be a big, and it's bigger than Cintrifuse, right? I mean, it's like, Chamber of Commerce, there's state groups, there's opportunities to hold hands with Northern Kentucky because there's areas of common concern. So I'm trying to understand what's under the hood. I'm very, very encouraged that at least on the IRA, there's just billions and billions on the green front, right? I mean, green mobility. And so I'm kind of, I see that as very, very healthy tailwinds that potentially could advance some of these thesis areas, but I got to do my homework a bit more. And I'm going to be knocking on the door of some of our elected officials to see if they can kind of help us on that front, or maybe kind of sharpen the vision. And, but I'm super optimistic, and I think it's a great opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah. And, part of this is the whole regional innovation hubs that are being created in development. I think that's a real positive. So, so it should have more cohesiveness in the region. Like there's no centralized body to pull it all together and go after it as a region. So for instance, Cincinnati would probably end up competing with Cleveland or some other place. So I think that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have unique leverage to do that. I mean, I was just talking to our head of external relations and startup Cincy, a woman named Donna Zaring, and I think we've come a long way in building coalitions of stakeholders, and I think we now need to kind of raise the game. And I think half the game is just helping everyone see possibilities and to embrace a sense of urgency. And that's really hard. But I do think startup groups, that's in their DNA. I mean, I'm kind of an urgent optimist. I see possibilities, but I'm always pushing a sense of urgency, which is like snooze, you lose. If you don't focus it on, today, here today, gone tomorrow, you don't want to be an alarmist about it. And I think as these federal programs start to materialize, or kind of now go through the cycle of money is ready to be, I think we need to kind of grab that. And I think, we're going to be spending a lot of time doing precisely what you said.
Okay. So there were a couple questions about whether Cintrifuse has some fintech investments, and one person points out the IRS has a large presence in the Cincinnati area. So so what about that? Oh,
there's a ton of, there's so many fintechs. I can't speak directly to like the IRS synergy, but I think, future of payments, that is such a, I think that is an area where there's a ton of potential. There's companies like Neural Payments. What
was that other company besides WorldPay? You mentioned WorldPay. What was it?
Paycor. Paycor is like all over the Bengals Stadium, and I think they've got roots in Fifth Third, but at one point they were a startup. But like Neural Payments, they just got $8 million, kind of a white label P2P money transfer platform for credit unions and small financial institutions. They're kind of challenging Zelle as a platform of choice for small players. There's Pay Theory, there's Coterie. There's quite a few fintechs in the region that are showing tremendous potential. There's also, there's quite a bit of work around areas like, event management. Lurch, for example, just recently completed a Techstars. They actually Tesla Techstars Tulsa accelerator work, but they're based in Cincinnati, and they've got like a concierge app that all about improving live event experiences, which we know is definitely an opportunity area. But there's a lot of different, areas. Get Together just got funded by Drive up the road. They're based in Columbus, but a lot of the jobs that they're creating through startups are here in Cincinnati. They're also a graduate of one of our accelerators, Ocean, and they basically have an AI assistant that immediately finds the best time to attend, to meet with others. So there's a lot of space being developed. There's some really exciting startups. There's a lot around mobility. There's a bit of a corridor that's developing between Cincinnati and Columbus. In fact, we're looking at our Chamber of Commerce is exploring whether we might want to think a bit more aggressively about almost like a Dallas-Fort Worth model between Cincinnati and Columbus. They're kind of getting unified already if you're going to look at all the development around the freeways. But one of the startups a little bit up the road is called Volantra, and they're developing engines to provide economic kind of hypersonic flight, unmanned aerial vehicles, and an unmanned aerial systems technology. And that kind of draws from, we're very close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is one of the biggest bases in the world. It's also kind of close to where the Wright brothers kind of took flight initially, or kind of developed their technology or capability. And so, there's a lot of reasons why this area has a lot of potential.
Okay, well, that's great. So if there are no more questions, we'll take the show to the next level then. Sometimes we do a poll, but we'll skip the poll this time. I do want to say a few more words and thank Pete for his time. It was really enlightening. I can see why you have the job as CEO of Cintrifuse. You're in the right place at the right time. You can make it happen, and you are making it happen. So good for you. Ashley, we hope to bring
We have a great team.
Yeah, it sounds like you do. So Silicon Heartland in Cincinnati in the future, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Big time.
Good.
Ours to lose.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Ours to lose.
Ours to lose. Okay. Yes, that's right. All right. So I am going to be doing on the road tour pretty soon.
Can't wait to host you.
Okay, good. The book launch is March 7th. I'm going to speak at South by Southwest on March 11th. And then I'm going to start the book tour. And so I hope to work in Cincinnati there and bring a lot more energy to Cincinnati. It sounds like it already has a lot of energy going for it. And certainly I saw that one on the couple of times I visited recently. Yeah, and also I should mention that our CES show is coming up in Vegas, Las Vegas. That's January 5. So hopefully everyone who's listening in will sign up. It's a live event in person. So we have our AskAVC show there as well, some tech chats with entrepreneurs, and that's January 5th, 5 to 7 p.m. Okay. Without further ado, I'd like to thank Pete again, and thank you for all your listening out there, you audience. Thanks for some good questions. We did record this, so we're going to put it on line pretty soon, so everybody can share and enjoy it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Pete. Take care.
Thank you. See you soon. See you in Cincinnati.
See you in Cincinnati.
Good luck with CES.
Thank you. Bye-bye.